Good afternoon, and we are live. And welcome to the Leicester Till I Die post-match show. I hope this is going out on Facebook, just to show that we are here. Going to be one of our regular shows again. Hopefully, every time after we've played a game, and we've just finished the pre-season. So I'd like to welcome along the gentleman that's going to be joining me every post-match, and that is Brad. So let me bring Brad in and say good afternoon, Brad.
Hello.
So how are we feeling?
Chris. It's great to be here. I'm feeling good. Yeah, it's great. It's something we've been talking around for a while, so it's nice to get it into fruition and start off with a lovely pre-season.
Yeah, it's got to be one of the weirdest pre-seasons I think I've known, and I'm getting on a bit now. But it's the nature of the beast this year, isn't it? You know, and I think do you think we always try and read too much into pre-seasons?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest problem we have as fans, is especially this one, because there's just been no shut off. Realistically, there's not, has there? There's only been a couple of weeks where they've had a bit of a reprieve. Either they're away on international duty or they're in the mix for pre-season. I think the problem is you can read too much into this, and a new signing, the pressure's on them. I know obviously we've only made one and he's on international duty at the moment, but yeah, I think you just have to enjoy it and see I think realistically, especially this game, because we had 5 youngsters out there and a few more that came on, and obviously Amati returned from injury. You just get to see where they're at in the development. It just shows you the connection between our youth and the first team, and how they're, trying to program the kids these days and the youngsters to be ready for that step up at any point. Because obviously a few of them already have last season. I've had to stop to the first team.
You're breaking up a little bit, Brad, but I think I got the point you were trying to make there. Just welcoming everybody that is watching. We've got a few watching now. Please feel free to put a comment in, just to let you know it is only going out on Facebook. So if you're watching on Facebook, you can either join onto StreamYard, and then that will bring your profile up so I know who I'm talking to. But if not, feel free to put your name at the end of your comment, and then we can give you a shout out. So yeah, I thought just going back to today's game, then I thought the youngsters actually didn't do too bad at all.
No. I will hold my hands up. I do keep an eye on the under 23s, but I wouldn't say I've invested in great detail like some of our fans do that go to the games, and they're a massive credit because they go home and away for both, not just the first team but the under 23s. But I thought Daly Campbell played really well on the right, and I think what you could also see was not just the connection they had with themselves, because obviously a lot of them had been playing together and learned how to. They kind of read each other where they were. They were making some nice passes that you could tell that's years of building and trust and that. But they also had the experience on there, so they were comfortable to know that if something went wrong, and obviously they like to correct it themselves, but someone was there with the experienced head. And I think they did well. I think they put on a display worthy of saying, well, not some of them over a long sustained period of the season, but a cup run, you could definitely see them causing some troubles in that and giving Brendan a few selection headaches.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen worse performances from the Leicester side over the past few years.
Yeah.
Definitely, and that's the starting 11. And I think we know when we look at that sort of team that they're not probably going to be starting, and they're not going to be going out on the first Europa League game, etc., etc. But I feel better having watched that. I mean, I must admit, I didn't see either the Birmingham or Sheffield Wednesday games, but I feel better having I feel better having watched that, because, like I say, I think looking at some of those youngsters, whilst they won't be starters, you think like, well, if they've got to come in for an injury, or to cover for the last 20 minutes of a game, or even start a game because of injury or suspension, I think we've got all right. I think we've got players that looking at them, like you said, look comfy on the ball and could come in and do a job.
Yeah, and again, to further that point, having fought, well, having four other players around one. Obviously, one was a goalkeeper, but for outfield, having four outfield players that you've worked with through youth. You're not just talking about players like the first team. You've got Ndidi, Vardy, Tillemans, Madison. They've been there a few years now. Um, they've got to know each other over a period of time. With youngsters, what you have where you maybe lack the experience and the physicality of Premier League football, or just in general playing at a first team level. What you also get is you get guys that have probably been together since the age of 13, 14, 15, and they just know each other inside out. And that's one thing I've always backed with our club. And look, your opinions on Claude Puel, or you like, everybody has their own. He was like Marmite, but he was the first real manager that really started to blood the youngsters in. I mean, Chowdhury made his debut under us, under Puel. There was a few other names that have not here now, or have fallen back down the order, or have gone out on loan. But that was the starting process of it. And you got to give credit not just to the staff, but for the manager, because it's easy for a first team manager to maybe just go, give me a piece of paper. What was the result? Oh, we wanted to. Oh, he scored goals, and maybe I'll put him in. And I think a lot of first team managers would look at how Leicester handle it and how very around their youth they are. That maybe some other teams would look at it and go, we maybe need to start paying our youth a bit more attention, because you forget that's some of them players have probably got 10 years of development with each other if they've stuck together and been through the academy. I mean, personally, my man of the match was Dewsbury Hall. I thought he was fantastic today. He chased everything down.
I mean, I think it might be Dewsbury Hall. Is he 23? So you could actually say he's not a young player anymore.
Well, no, and I watched the game. I watched the game on LCFC TV, and Matt Elliott made that point. They're not a young pup in today's football at 23.
No.
I mean, maybe in the 90s and 2000s, bringing through someone of that, you're thinking, God, they're going young with this squad. They're not taking this game seriously. They're resting players, and that's the quality you had. I mean, you. I remember a discussion that someone brought up on one of the Facebook pages, and I said, you've got to if you take out Vardy, Casper, Evans from our starting lineup, you've got a brilliant average age that hasn't just popped up out of nowhere. It's been in the change. Just seeing a comment there behind that. We'll talk about the comments that come up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think seeing this over the last couple of years, it's been a very good tuition that's slowly paying off for Leicester. And I think maybe this season will be another one where patience is needed, especially with European football coming and the blooding of youngsters. The likes of Dewsbury Hall might get a lot more game time.
Yeah, I mean, when just looking at that last comment, let me just put it back up again there. Not good enough, I'm afraid to say, regardless if they start or not, they would be way out of the depth in the Premier League. But these players have got to start somewhere.
Yeah, of course.
We are, we're in a position now that I think, some of the fans think that we're out there now with Man City, and we should be going out and we should be spending lots and lots of money on bringing big name stars in. And, we tried that after we won the Premier League, and how many of those players are still here now? It didn't. And you look at, as I think it was Alan Hansen once said, you win nothing with youngsters, and Alex Ferguson went out there and proved him wrong. Now, I'm not saying that we're going to win everything next season, but what I'm saying is we've got the players that if they come on, for 10 minutes, I don't think they're going to embarrass themselves. I mean, obviously they could always have the odd bad game, of course they could, but I just think it's. Are we relying too much on, going out and buying?
Well, see, the problem is Leicester as a club on a whole are progressing, in my personal opinion, very not. I wouldn't say at a slow pace, but they're definitely. Yeah, youth is definitely the future. to go on that. They're actually progressing probably a little bit still under the radar, even though, the pundits and the media are still talking, Leicester developing. I made a point with a friend of mine, who I'm going to get a lot of boos for this, but he's a Spurs fan, but he's actually a good Spurs fan. They're not all bad. And I said, we remind Leicester now remind myself of Spurs when they started bringing in the talents. When they were the whispers and the talks of, oh, can they get the top six? Can they be? Oh, well, now they've got the top six. Will they be consistent in Europe? Will they struggle? And they brought the players in, and they didn't just get any old talent. They didn't just, which is probably where we was probably a bit naive, where we looked at someone and players that had sparkled in a league when realistically at that point we probably tried to shut the depth up as best as we can, as quick as we can, and unfortunately it backfired for us on that season. But we're now, after that, I'd say again making my point about Claude Puel coming in and he was the start platform to bring in youngsters. I think we've now found the way we want to do it, and you just look at our signings over the last few seasons. Wilfred Ndidi, apart from sticking him in goal, I think he's just shown he can play in any position we want him to.
He did all right in central defence, didn't he, today?
Yes, he did, and he looked composed and actually calm, and that was something to really take away from the game. And to go back to that point about youth being the future, I think that's been a very strong message that Leicester have made sure that whoever they've brought in, whether it's backroom staff or it's a promotion from the youth team or even the manager himself, that the focus needs to be on making sure that you are looking at the place developing. Otherwise, there's no point having a youth system. There's no point having a youth system if no one's ever going to get into that team. And I just think
for me, I was just going to say, I think it's great having a youth system. I think, and I made this point a couple of weeks ago, and I'm old enough to remember when we used to have proper reserve teams, and these players that were coming through, these players that the likes of Grays and people like that weren't getting regular first team starts would be doing in the reserve, but there's nowhere for them to progress from the youth up to the first team.
Yeah, that's true. I think we have a lot of things, and the biggest example, I think what's not helping situations at the moment, and it's just natural reactions. I had a reaction to it as well. Is Chelsea have gone out and spent millions. Let's not dash that over. But I think when you see so much transfer activity in any window, in any circumstances, because I don't want to kind of use the circumstances and the excuse, for the season. But I do want to say that they've gone out and spent big on players that are capable, and I think that's set a panic about with a lot of fans, and it's understandable, totally understandable. We want to bring players in, we want to progress, and the squad depth does need a bit of added experience, I'd say, and a lot more cover and depth.
Yeah.
But we've also got to have faith. We've sang a lot of praises about these owners, and at times I know it's chopped and changed over the years, but our scouting staff, and I think for every gem they found, they've probably to bring out names I've seen a lot of mention, but Musa is obviously one of them. Slimani, Adrian Silva was more unfortunate than it was anything with all that thing. So we've not actually always had the best success. And I think it's a lot easier to criticise than it is to maybe, look at the bigger picture and say, well, look at the ones that have been a success. Your Wilfred Ndidis that are still young. And, Ndidi feels like he's been at the club for years.
Yeah.
But he's only early 20s. Chowdhury as well.
Taking those points on. Chowdhury, I was going to mention, it's almost like, I forgot we'd got Chowdhury because not long ago he was starting, and I thought he had a good game. He was all over the pitch, and he was getting. You always know with Chowdhury he's only one tackle away, probably from a red card. But,
Newcastle fans will remind us of that.
Yeah, but he, I thought he did really, really well today. In fact, for me, he was my man of the match. I must admit, I thought he did really well. But Dewsbury Hall, like you say, played well. But we've got to. I think we're all, a lot of us probably are either sort of glass half empty rather than glass half full. But just the point that Craig, who does the Tuesday night show with me, has just posted. Great to see Marty back on the pitch. Only 3 years ago was player of the tournament at the African Nations Cup, playing at centre half. So he could be. He played really. He did all right when he came on, and I think he was unfortunate with the injury. But he was a player that people didn't seem to take to when we first got him. I know he made a couple of bad errors when he was first slotting at right back, but he's only, he's not that old either. I don't think, is he?
No, I still think he's only in his low mid-20s, which might sound like a weird statement to make, but he's definitely someone that came in. And unfortunately, I think you find when you have maybe a household name in a position that you play, or a more recognisable name. I know at the time we only had Danny Simpson, but when you're coming off the back of the story of what Leicester achieved and what we achieved as a club, which obviously we'll never forget, I think when someone comes in with Young, which he was at the time when he signed for us. Obviously, he's been here a few years himself now, and if he don't take that position as impactfully as he was probably hoping, and obviously himself with injuries, it's very hard to kind of work your way back into it. And I did notice today that Mendy, he played, didn't he? He was on the pitch, but not once did he seem to do anything wrong. He didn't do anything to, set the world on fire, of course, but that's not his job. That's what Wilfred and Didi and Madison's are there for. He's there to be that steady little thing. And I didn't hear Elliot or anybody, any commentator or anything, mention him once. And I don't think he put too much wrong out of place.
I was going to say exactly the same. I mean, for me, the draw is out on Mendy. I don't think he does a lot wrong, but like you say, he doesn't do anything spectacular that earns the headlines and what have you. But at one point, I had to look and go, is he still on the pitch? I haven't heard him mentioned.
Exactly.
But the other argument with that is that he's just getting on with his job, doing nothing spectacular, but just doing what he's being asked to do. And I think when you look at the fact that if a player stays on in those sort of games the full 90 minutes, the manager's reasonably happy with him.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, if you were to ask Leicester fans, what player do you think was really underrated? I've not spoke about them enough going back for the years. So I'm only going off like what I can remember from posts and stuff like that. And I know a few names that are floated around, like Steve Guppy, very good player, very underrated. And I'm not saying that someone like, I'm not even saying he's close to, and that's just because I thought Steve Guppy was an amazing player in that aspect. But in the sense of the job he does, you could almost see today as if Brendan went, go about your business.
Yeah.
Because he's been playing him, and for whatever reason, whether fans like him or not, he's not the first manager to keep Mendy around. Fans might be screaming from him, soul, get rid of him, get someone else in. But he knows the lads. He knows what to do. And while he's not been the best at times when he's played, I think he got 7. Did he play the full 90? I mean, like you said, it was a shame that you didn't really hear his name, because every time I kind of went, he's still on then. He's still on. He's still shoring things up.
Yeah.
He's kind of like Brendan went, he did his job. I wouldn't have put him in the mix for man of the match.
No.
And I think you were right in saying Chowdhury was definitely a good shout. I think it was one of them. It's either or for me with Dewsbury Hall, but for a constant on the pitch, I saw him probably slightly more than I did Hamza. But then Hamza, you have to remember, is also more registered as cover for Ndidi. Yeah. So his role probably changed, especially when we won 1-0 up. And ironically, Amati got the goal.
Yeah, I don't think he'll ever have an easier one. I think
I've seen them missed.
The problem we've got with Leicester is that players aren't going to come to Leicester if we go out and sign these big stars. They're not going to want to come to Leicester and sit on the bench. And we have to accept that a player will go to Leicester. We'll leave. We'll go to say a Man City or a club like that, which is still deemed to be one of the big six, etc., and be prepared to sit on the bench because they know year in year out they're going to get European football, etc.
Yeah,
Leicester, we're just not there yet, and I don't think people come to Leicester and go, I don't want to go to Leicester and sit on the bench. And you're going to have a few players like the Mendes that are happy to sit there week in, week out, and when needed, come on and do a job for us.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly what they're there for. I mean, you're very right in saying. I think a lot of Leicester fans, and look, be as optimistic as you want. Nobody was as genuinely as optimistic we was ever going to win the league like we did, right? And maybe I was probably one of them that thought we could do really well in the Champions League. I think on another night, who knows with Atletico, but they're our bogey team, as we know.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of Leicester fans just have to maybe take a sit back and kind of think, does getting two different European competition in the space of over 5 years, 5 years, really give you the right to go, we're now a top six side? Because it didn't for Spurs, and they missed out, to make that comparison back then. It's the only recent comparison I can have to a side like that wasn't, brought by Man City or Chelsea, the fund and that, was they had players that maybe cost them a bit more on the wage packet and the bonuses to kind of convince them to come. I mean, rumours of the left back we signed, no, I'm not going to butcher his name. Rumours are that he nearly signed for Spurs and picked us in the end. So was that a better deal, or did he generally come here thinking Leicester have more of a challenge and more of something I want to buy into? And as a Leicester fan, you're hoping it's the latter, and not a case of they're offered me more money, which is always the biggest talking point, unfortunately, in football.
I think when it comes, I think obviously, like you say, Spurs are very much like us. They haven't got millions and millions and millions to spend. Maybe he looked at us and he looked at Spurs and thought, you know what, I'm going to get more game time.
Well, that also obviously plays a factor in it, and there was a comment I saw just pop up that you put on the screen about 5 minutes ago about a mixture of youth and experienced players. Yeah. And it's very correct. There's a few injuries. We just seen Marty come back from one. We know Mendy's susceptible to injuries. And at the end of the day, you do need that cover. And at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, I do agree. Luke Thomas did struggle today. I don't know. You can't say that wasn't something that it doesn't make him ready for it. I think he's more at that stage, and I don't like to kind of say it, but I think he's more at that stage now where Childry was a few years ago, where you put him in a game where you maybe think the result could go, you might get a good run in the Carabao Cup. Leicester over the last couple of years, not as infamous as they were in the 90s, but have done well in the cups. They got to quarterfinals, which might not sound a lot, but it's at least 3-4 games experience of these lot. And obviously, with the development of the under 23 levels now, they have the Champions League football that they were playing and have been playing. They have their own tournaments that they do. Just being in and around that first team, a lot of them coming into the back end. Dewsbury Hall, who, like I said, was my pick of the favourites today for man of the match, looked like a player that was, I don't know how to put it, 75% of the way there to really start making the likes of players in his position currently kind of go, I need to make sure I don't let things drop, because if this lad comes in and plays like he did, I'm going to be in trouble. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing for any player to have. I think the biggest problem that some clubs have is if they don't have that competition or that competition they bring in. Because there's no point Leicester bringing in 4 or 5 players from League One who are in the mid-20s or Championship and going, and that's no disrespect. I'm talking like teams like if we was to sign someone from today's opposition and just go, well, we're signing a filler. You get yourself a Premier League wage. I don't think the players, you don't react to that. But if you've got someone who's got 4 or 5 youngsters coming through the ranks that have worked together, know each other inside out, like we've seen, and there was some good plays between the youngsters today that made that happen. You want your player, if you're a star man on that team, whether it's Vardy or Maddison or whether it's Johnny Evans, going, yeah, I've got to make sure I'm on top of my game every game.
I think this is the problem we've had over a few years, is that we haven't had this competition for places. I think players could almost go and say, yeah, I'm playing next week, I'm playing the week after, etc.
Yeah.
But I think, with the likes of Luke Thomas, I think I don't think he's done anything particularly bad. I think he's done well since he came in at the back end of last season and what have you. But I think, we know that if everybody is fit for the main big games, it's going to be Piera and Castagna. And those are going to be the two probably, unless he goes through at the back, but those are going to be the two that are going to be started. But you're looking at Luke Thomas and go for a season or two, you're blooding them in. They're getting an experience. They're coming in when needed. They'll do a job when's needed, and maybe in a couple of seasons they will be ready.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one thing that we need to look up towards is something. And I know I'm making a tired point with the same player, but with someone like Dewsbury Hall, and I always go to say Thomas, and I know it's Luke, who's a left back. But Luke Thomas, is it Luke Thomas? God, my mind's gone blank.
It's Luke Thomas.
Yeah, because I always go say someone else. I get so confused with my name at the time. But I think what you'll see from them, and it's something that did stop, is with the likes of Chowdhury, and obviously we called Harvey Barnes back, two prime examples. And there's no shame in making just them two examples of what we can do with the youth. I know he's gone now, but Chilwell was another example of that. And the fact is, I think you can see, especially Dewsbury Hall and Luke Thomas, sitting on that bench and staying at Leicester all season, because I remember seeing a report before it eventually happened that there was some iffy thing with the medical, with Chilwell and whatever and all that. But putting that aside, there was a reason Brendan Rodgers blooded him in. And maybe it wasn't ideally what Brendan and Luke was thinking was going to happen. Maybe he thought this, next season will be where I maybe get the start at the start of the season in the early rounds of the cup, and then I'll go out on loan and come back better and whatnot. But you've got to remember, if Chilwell had gone, I from what I've seen of him, yes, he gave the ball away a lot today, and it's pre-season. I don't like to look too much into that. And I think out of his games, because he played 5 or 6 games at the back end of the season.
I can't remember exactly, but 5 or 6, I think it was. Yeah.
And I think the only game that I can remember that he had an absolute mare at, which was not exactly, a case for everybody, but most of the squad had a mare in that game, and that was Tottenham away. If you're telling me a youngster that hasn't had any first team experience comes in and has one bad game every 5, yes, in the Premier League eventually he's going to get cut down. But if you're saying he plays 5 games a season or 6 or 7 games a season, whether that's 3 or 4 cup games and a couple of substitute appearances in the league, I would not have begrudged Brendan Rodgers coming out and going, I don't need to replace Chilwell. I've already got him made. Because we did exactly the same with Chilwell. We had Christian Fuchs as the experience. And I think keeping Fuchs and players like that is actually just as important as the youngsters, because if you keep Thomas and you keep Dewsbury Hall and you've got them experienced heads that have got the experience and a bit more age on their side and a bit more about them in content of first team experience, that they're going to just help development. Fuchs did it for Chilwell. Well, why can't he do that now this season for Thomas?
It's not always about what they bring on the pitch. Yeah, it's not always about what they bring on the pitch. It's what we don't see that these older players are bringing to the training ground. Yeah, I think as well. I think we're in 4 competitions next season. We've got the Premier League, the Europa League, and then the 2 cups. And I don't think you can expect our strongest team to be playing in all 4 competitions every game. So I think the likes of your Dewsbury Halls, your Luke Thomases, they'll probably be on the bench as cover in the big games. But I think they'll be featuring a lot in the likes of the League Cup, even possibly the FA Cup, because it's obviously the Premier League and the Europa League are going to be the two that we're going for, and then that
Yeah.
will release the more experienced stroke older players, give them a break from those games so that they're fitter for the Prem and the Europa.
Yeah, definitely. I 100% agree with you on that. And I think fans will have to kind of go with that this season. Because look, if Brendan Cuddy plays strongest team every week, I'm sure he would. But if you're going to enter a period, and this is not even, well, it won't be this season, obviously, but in a normal season, you'd have that madness of Christmas rush. And regardless of the fact that there's a winter break, now in session for the foreseeable. Like, I don't know what's happened with that ruling, whether that's changed, but you know, for the for the start of the season, I think Leicester fans. It's easy to say, oh, well, you're not giving the competition respect. No, if you're putting out your under 18s, and I'm not mentioning a certain team, but they're playing red and they won the Premiership, that maybe a lot of fans got riled up and a lot of people came out and gave them stick for it. I was one of them. I'm going to hold my hands up. You want to check my Twitter that I don't use anymore? I gave a hurl of abuse for how they treat the cup. And I would backly say that if Brendan Rodgers just chucked the under 18s out of it, but you can't have your cake and eat it. And I think what we're seeing now, what we've seen over the years in the first team with the blooding of youngsters and the younger talents being brought in, Ndidi, Madison, Chowdhury, all coming together. And now we've got Dewsbury Hall. And like I said, Daly Campbell, he looked very good on the right for me.
Yeah.
Didn't have his best game in the second half, faded off a bit, and I think he came off. I actually was away from my computer at that point when I saw something. I just saw Marty come on.
Yeah.
So apologies if he did play the full 90 minutes. Someone can correct
No,
me in the comments.
he did come off towards the end. Yeah.
Right. But again, I think we're going to have to expect that, like you said, and there's no disrespect to the competition, but you can't say give the youngsters a chance. Let's get the youngsters in, and then when we draw an opposition out in the early rounds, whether it's Premier League or whether it's National League or whether it's whatever, and look, every team's had an upset. We all fondly remember our upset, the more infamous one against Wycombe Wanderers, and obviously in recent years Newport County.
Yeah.
I think you're going to have to expect. There's no point, like I said earlier, there's no point having a youth system if you're not going to get them involved. Because if you have these guys in and around the first team for a season, you've got to give them match time. And whether it's Blackburn Rovers, whether it's Plymouth Argyle, or whether it's Arsenal, it doesn't matter who you're playing in the third or fourth rounds of the cup. If Brendan Rodgers sees these as genuine first teamers in years to come, or even as early as next season, you've got to start somewhere, like you said, Chris, and they have to start in games where, like you say, I think obviously our focus will be on FA. I maybe throw the FA Cup in there, depending on how things go in the Europa League, because we don't know how that's going to go. But until that becomes a thing, definitely Europa League and the league will be the main focus. But at the same time, you've got to let these youngsters get out there and prove what they're worth and learn from their mistakes, more importantly.
I mean, I think you've only got to look at, the team that sort of took us out the top four, Chelsea. Under Mourinho, I don't think they had a youth policy at all. His policy,
I think they forgot youth exist.
Yeah, it was buy. That's all Mourinho did. He wasn't interested in bringing the youth through. And then, you look at what Frank Lampard did this year because he had to bring the youth through because he couldn't go out and buy. I know he's making up for that now, but the youth didn't do too bad. But I want to just quickly touch on a couple of players that I didn't see, weren't in the squad today, and anybody that's watching might be able to tell us whether they were in the squads for either of the other two games. But I mean, our goalkeeper I thought did all right. He didn't do sort of much. I don't think you can really necessarily blame him for the goal.
Bit shaky on a few crosses, but generally, he was all right.
For a youngster. But I noticed our backup keeper was Japokovic, and I just don't know what's happened to Danny Ward.
Yeah, see, this is the problem you've got. I mean, the problem is you've got so many players out there, and especially this season, with a shortened break and a shortened pre-season, we'd be looking at this at any normal season going, well, we've got a couple of games. We've got the big King Power game to go. Well, we've probably got, we've always had someone like a Real Madrid and an Atlanta the season before, and we haven't really had that. And obviously, that's probably more due to the financial situation. And there's no, and then to me, there's no appeal to it when it's when there's no fans in the ground, a game like that. When it's just a friendly, obviously, if we was playing Real Madrid in Europa League, I'd be doing backflips in the garden if we was taking them to a 1-1 draw.
Yeah.
But I just feel. Oh, I've lost my point now. What was I saying? What was we talking about then? Before it's gone. Yeah, he's on wage duties. We just had that. So
you were doing backflips in your garden, which we're going to have on. We're going to have you doing on screen one day. Actually, that is one day. About Danny Ward. I hadn't thought about him being with Wales. Thank you to Wade Welch. That was so. Thank you, Wade.
Thank you, Wade.
That. The other one I was going to.
Sorry.
So the other one I was going to mention was Benkovic, and I just don't get.
Yeah, I mean, strange one.
Yeah, because Rodgers had him at Celtic for like a season, and he was
and really spoke highly of him.
Yeah, and yet he's just he can't sit there and go he's not ready for the Premier League when if he is what the papers are saying, looking at half the Celtic squad to come into Leicester, you can't say that they're good enough. Yeah, and Benkovic isn't, and I just don't know. Is he going to be another Kaputska?
I'd like to say not. I just remember where I was going with my point earlier. I'll just quickly throw that out there. The problem is you've also got players that I know Jakupovic is one of them that has spoken out before that he wants to maybe move on. I see it as a way to get them players out and get them a bit of a show. But yeah, going on to this point with Benkovic, it's an interesting one because he's suffered with a few injuries. He got injured, I believe, when he actually did come on and play for his last season. And
you there, Brad?
The thing is, the problem is,
Brad, you're breaking up. Yeah, no, I got you back. You're back.
Yeah. Yes, I think he's been very unfortunate with his injuries. I believe before Brendan left Celtic to come to us, he had a season-ending injury, didn't he? Which I think put Soyuncu up that pecking order instantly because he's only got one central defender. And let's not forget, everybody was harping on about these two coming in and being the next things that replaced our centre-back pairings. Well, we only lost one. And we already was in. There's two players were fighting for one position, essentially. And, Soyuncu got the nod, and maybe that was for his fitness. Maybe Brendan just saw. I know he worked with Benkovic, but maybe he saw more of him in a competitive Premier League environment, which he didn't get with Benkovic. And that's no aside on the Scottish League football. I don't want to get into that political debate, but he saw more of him in a Premier League standard on the training ground pitch. And when push came to shove, Soyuncu got the nod, and he's embraced it ever since. I mean, he's a fan favourite from the word go.
Was it? That wasn't a bad decision.
No, it really wasn't.
No.
But my feeling is, had Leicester been in a situation where maybe we hadn't signed Johnny Evans and we still only had Morgan and Huth, and obviously Huth left as well, we would have been seeing Benkovic play more. But right now, for next season, or possibly two, depending on if Evans stays injury-free and has a brilliant season like he has done since he's arrived at the club, Benkovic is the player that's going to go out on loan. Maybe in January, might spend 6 months with the squad to get him there. And I think what you see in the background, what us as fans don't always get to see behind closed doors, as the saying is we're maybe getting Benkovic ready to make that step up for when someone like Evans goes. Because we had to do it with Maguire. But again, I think maybe that was something we already knew deep down. I think when he joined us, he always made a statement about Manchester United and a club he wanted to go to. And I think, maybe it was a flip of a coin. It was a bit strange that he worked with Benkovic and spoke highly of him. And it's just one of the things. I mean, like I said, maybe he saw something in Simon True that clearly has worked out for not just him, but the football club, that he's
Yeah.
come on leaps and bounds and become a bit of a cult hero at Leicester. But there's no reason why next season or at some point, maybe this season, depending on Evans with injury, obviously. Is it Evans that's still got the suspension for the start of the
Yeah,
season?
yeah,
So
Evans, yeah.
you might even see him playing there. You
Yeah.
might see him playing the first couple of games of the season, or however long it is he's suspended for.
We won't be long now till we find out.
No, 8 days.
8 days. This time next week, we'll be getting rather excited, ready for the Sunday.
Yeah,
West Bromwich Albion. I remember saying on Tuesday when I did the Tuesday show with Craig that I was feeling a little bit kind of meh about the whole thing. I wasn't getting excited, and I don't know. I'm getting a little bit of a buzz now. It's only a week. We have got one signing in. I'm
yeah.
getting a little bit excited.
I think. Yes, which is a bit of a relief. Yeah, it's definitely a relief. I think football season is very much like Christmas when you're a kid, more for Christmas than it is football. But you kind of get into December when it's Christmas. You're like, no, it's just December, isn't it? Cold, miserable weather, not really
Yeah,
bothered. There's a few things going on. I'll do it. But when it gets closer and it gets, 3 days, you start. I'm 30. I still have my advent calendar. My mum makes sure of that. Um, you start opening them windows and you slowly realise you're getting close to the last week of Christmas
yeah,
and you get a bit more excited, don't you? You start thinking, oh, who am I going to see? We're going to get, oh, am I going to get this? We're going to get that. And it's the same with football. We're going to get this player. Is that one coming in? Or we're getting close to the time now. And then, and then that first game is just the most electric you'll ever get for an atmosphere. And unfortunately, the crowds we're missing from that point. But I think you almost feel it when you're watching it, as if you realise, you're sitting there watching it with thousands of Leicester fans or fans of just your team in general, and you just feel this is it. Come on, let's get going. Yeah, we're in the swing of things now, and you're really enjoying the thrill of it. And when you just get that little bite of a week before it starts, or in this case, 8 days before the real deal starts, you kind of feel a bit
yeah.
more into it a little bit, and you kind of draw yourself in a bit. I think that helps. I think that's what it's like.
Well, I'm going to ask you this then to just to sort of draw the chat to the end. I have a prediction page on the website, leicestertillidie.com. I do it along with ex-Foxes, Steve Walsh, Steve Lynix and Ian Marshall. So I've got a defender, a midfielder and a striker in there. Now, we've gone for scores of... I've gone for a 1-0 win. I think we haven't got the full strength team back. We still have a couple of players out, like we've said. But I think we might just be able to nick it.
You've
Steve
gone
Walsh,
a little bit on my end, Chris. Give me a minute.
sorry?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Steve Walsh has gone for a 2-0.
No, it's right. You're back now.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
I've gone for 1-0. Steve Walsh has gone for a 2-0. Steve Lynix has gone for a 2-0 and Ian Marshall has gone for a 2-1. So we've all gone for a Leicester win. Would you agree with that?
I think we will get the win. I know our record against newly promoted sides over the last couple of years hasn't been the best of an opening fixture. I say that the only one I realistically remember was the Hull one. We all know how that went. But we liked, especially Vardy, we like a goal or two against Aggies, don't we? And I think I'm going to go for the same line that started the magnificent journey all them years back. And I'm going to go for a fiery, open Sunday lunch kickoff. And I'm going to go for Foxes to be 3-2.
3-2.
And hopefully be like a 90th second goal for West Brom. We'll let them have that one. And maybe Vardy.
You don't want to make it easy for us, do you? You say you don't want to make it easy for us.
No, we never do. When have we ever in a club done things by halves? We never do, do we? So I think
I'll take your Hull game and I'll trump that with the Bolton game when Peter Taylor was manager, and it was the season following the Wickham FA Cup game, and we'd had a really good start. Yes, yeah. after the Wickham game, everything just went totally wrong. We literally, not unlike last season, which was a bit scary, but yeah, it all went down the pan very quickly.
The Liverpool game was that one for last season.
Yeah, and then we actually got stuffed by Bolton, who had just come up 5-0.
Yeah, I was hoping to avoid that one. That's why I went with a hole in my head. It does make the point, and I just feel like it's one of them where you don't want to underestimate anybody that comes up because they're coming up full of beans. I mean, look what we did in I think our first couple of games when we came up. We beat Manchester United. We got a draw, didn't we, against Arsenal?
Drew with Everton.
Drew with Everton in the last few minutes.
Yeah, Chelsea were the only one that beat us in those first 4 games.
Yeah, and if David Nugent had been looking for a flag, it could have been a different story. I remember that because I was out paintballing at the time when that happened, and I was like, "Why are you looking at the flag?" Which I think that's the only thing you can take, because I know a lot of fans don't like being involved in the game, and that's perfectly fine. With anyone's entitled to their opinion on it. But I think the one thing that's maybe helped strikers going forward, one thing you can take out of it is, to a point, until that ball either hits the back of the net offside, unless it's really obvious. And we saw a few today where the strikers on both sides kind of just didn't bother with the ball because they knew they were offside. But you see maybe a bit more clinical finishing and a bit more clinically going forward and just going, I'll let the VAR decide because I feel like I'm on, and not kind of going, oh, am I? And they've got the focus on. I think that's one thing you can take a positive out of VAR. I know a lot of people won't take many at all, but it's definitely one. But one pattern that just to end on a note, one pattern that I would notice that was the same from the first half in the second half was for 30 minutes, we was in control. We looked fiery and going forward. I think my biggest concern we have is in the last 15 minutes, again, we kind of looked a little bit lost, maybe a little bit out of sorts and out of ideas. And I know on a friendly, a lot of substitutes, and obviously a lot of first team players. Another mention of injured players and international players. And obviously it wasn't our first team squad that's going to start against West Brom. But I think you kind of have to look at that and go, well, that's something that still needs to be eradicated. It was nice to see us be a bit more stern, a bit more on the front foot for the first 20 minutes, half hour, but it was also a little bit concerning to see them last 15 minutes we died a death. And that's where Blackburn got the goal.
Do you not think that that's pretty much how our season was at the back end of last season? That we were on top at the start, we didn't take our chances. We should. There's a lot of games I can remember thinking at half time we should be, 2 or possibly even 3 up here, and we weren't, and we got, done in the second half.
Yeah, but every team goes through a stage like that. I think that the problem is, and I said this, in a way, as marvellous as our run was that first half of the season, I think it was a curse. I genuinely think it was a curse because the amount of fans that are going on about we only won 6 in 16, perfect right, or whatever the record was, perfect right. It's not good enough for this level. But I think I'd actually just rather had a season where we didn't lose for 5 games, lost, drew, win, 1-1-1. Yeah, and the run was more spread out over that first half of the season and continued into the second half of the season than I would have had it out that way. Because then maybe fans might have actually, I don't want to say the word appreciate because it's a wrong word, but there might have been more looking at fifth as, yes, we all know the points we lost from being fourth to end up in Europa League. But I think that had been I think if we'd more done what Man United did, who eventually picked us to that spot, and had a season more like theirs, Leicester fans would have probably come into not just the start of the season, but the transfer window going, you know what, yeah, this team's going nicely, they're still progressing, I can't wait for this season. I think the fact that we burned out as badly as we did in the second half of the season, everything became scrutinised tenfold. Taking the chances, the score lines, Because let's face it, if you look back on that run that we had, which is as amazing as it was, we had a few games in there where, yes, right, 9-0, 5-0, 4-0, 3-0. But we also had games where we drew and only just edged out our opponents, who at the start of the season, because we were still winning them games, are still on a really well. Fans kind of went, "I'll have bad days at the office." But once we sort of had them results where a 1-0 win was being snatched from us from a draw, or we were coming from behind and only getting a point against lower league opposition, it was more frustrated, which is, again, it's understandable considering the turn of fortune. But I just feel like if you was to span that out over a season and say Leicester finished fifth, they lost fourth on the last day of the season, but we didn't maybe have such a big lead. We was maybe in that mix of sixth to fourth, bouncing between it, ebbing and flowing like Manchester United were. We'd have a lot more confidence as fans per se to go into the season and look forward to the challenge of what's for us, because it's a big challenge, and I think we're actually more prepared for European football this season, than we ever were for the Champions League. Because if we all go back to that season, look at it, let's face it, obviously survival, making sure we didn't completely mess it up and go down or anything like that was a big thing, and we were probably obviously hoping to be a lot higher than where we were when Ranieri was let go of his position as manager. But I think we're a lot more prepared because that season we still had 4 competitions, but we throw our eggs into one basket. Whereas this season, we need to balance it, and we look like we are doing the right things to balance it. And I think we'll surprise a few people this season because, going back to your point about Chelsea, completely took youth away, whereas we've not.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we'll find out in 8 days' time, as you say.
Yes, definitely.
I say it's getting up close. Thank you so much for this afternoon, Brad, and I will see you next Sunday. It will be Sunday afternoon after the match. And
yes, definitely.
Don't forget, guys. Yeah, good. And look forward to that as well. And don't forget, Tuesday night, 7:30. You've got the 2 old men. You've got me and Craig. 2 old men chewing the cud, as we say. And then hopefully next Friday, I'm looking at trying to start up an opposition view cam chat. So we'll get a fan in from an opposing team. I've got one lined up for Burnley and got one lined up for Man City.
I've got 1 or 2 that I've kind of let them know, because I know we did this off air and that before we started this. I've got a couple that would be interested, given the opportunity, if they're available and free for Spurs as well. So I've got Tottenham.
Brilliant.
A few people that would be interested.
It'd
be nice to get a few opposition fans. So
that'd be good. Yeah. Well, you've got the opposition view, which is on the website leicestertilidie.com, and the opposition view page, where the West Brom one is already up, and the West Brom fan thinks we're going to win the Europa League. So I'm liking him already.
Wow.
And, let's go and have a good weekend. Like I say, thanks very much, Brad, and I shall see you next Sunday. And thanks everybody for watching and comments, and we'll see you all. I say, see Brad next Sunday, and we'll see you all on Tuesday at 7:30. Have a good weekend, Brad. Take care, mate.
Yeah, Andrew, take care, mate.